Welcome to Near Protocol, a green blockchain to register and sell your products without harming the environment. This is Karma Podcast.
Hi, my name is Sahil Masi. I'm a yoga teacher and a voiceover artist from India. And I've been spending a lot of time understanding financial independence and financial freedom and what are the ways to achieve them. Now, while I was going down the rabbit hole of financial independence, Ray Dalio's work came up and it really intrigued me. To give you a little history about Ray Dalio, he is the world's biggest hedge funds chairman, and he did not really get anything in a silver spoon or a silver platter. He comes from a very humble beginning, with his father being a jazz player and mother being a nurse. But he developed two abilities. One, the understanding that history repeats itself and applying patterns of the past to the current situation to understand how future would play out. And second, thorough objectivity so that truth can be seen and your opinions are not biased by your own emotions. These two fundamental abilities made the bedrock of him becoming the behemoth and the biggest hedge fund manager in the world. In 2008, when the markets were crashing, he knew that the markets are going to crash because of his studies. He saved his investors and provided a 14% return when all the companies were going bankrupt, and told the government as to what is the length and breadth of the damage that they will have to face and how do they come out of it. Even though he's at the top of the capitalist pyramid, he's talking about how capitalism is going to fail. And he's been talking about failing of capitalism since the past few years, since I've been following him. And it surprised me when I heard this thought about the changing world order 2-3 years back. It made no sense, because why is a guy who's at the top of the pyramid talking about its fall? And then came 2020, where things started changing a lot. And once again, Ray Dalio proved me wrong, because he placed a bet of $2.5 billion in December 2019, where all the markets were going up, saying that markets are going to crash in 2020 March. And I thought that, well, maybe the old guy doesn't know what he's talking about. My naive head, of course thinking that I know more than him, was humbled one more time. And after a series of events that I've seen him being right on, I started recognizing that his analysis of the past and predictability of the future has a lot of power. The most important thing that he's been talking about since the past 3 years, and now more so, is the changing world order and the big cycle. These two things are the beginning of a new age. According to Ray Dalio, all the empires that ever existed, that were in power, and their reserve currency was the one that was used by the entire world for trades, has risen, reached a top, and fallen down. And there are 8 factors, as per his studies, that determine whether the empire is rising or falling. And the 8 factors are the degree and the quality of education in that country, innovation and technology of the country, competitiveness in people and the country, output that it produces and what it gives out to the world, trade, military strength, the financial center and how strong it is, and the reserve status, which shows that how much money do they have and whether their currency is used as the currency for trade in the world or not. Now, when you put these factors on a graph and see how these factors are doing, whether they're going up or going down, or are they at a top, where they are essentially, you start understanding that the empire which is controlling the world, is it rising or is it falling? And not so surprisingly, the United States right now is going down on all these factors. And the country which is actually rising on all these factors is China, which, according to Ray Dalio, could be the next empire. Now, this is his theory that these are the 8 factors that determine the rise and fall of an empire. And these factors are placed on something called a big cycle. So an archetypical big cycle has a rise, the top, and the decline. The new empire begins with a strong leadership, and there is a lot of inventiveness, there's a lot of education and new sort of learnings that they're shared because the new empire has come to rise. There's strong culture because no other culture can challenge it, because this empire is now a leader and has won the wars. There are good resource allocations, which means that they have enough resources to grow. There is good competitiveness, which helps the industries to rise. There is strong income growth, and stock markets and financial market centers are rising. Then starts coming the top. When all these factors get a little overdone and start saturating, things become a little less productive, things are overextended, people start losing competitiveness. There are wealth gaps that start getting created. Once the wealth gap starts getting created, we can see that the decline phase begins. When there are wealth gaps, there are large debts that you can see on the balance sheet of different companies. There's excessive printing money because now the countries want to ensure that all these debts are taken care of and those debts don't consume the nation and they don't fall into recession. There's a lot of internal conflict that starts happening and external conflict also along with it. And slowly and steadily, the reserve currency that was being used around the world for trades starts losing its value. And then comes the last two phases. There's weak leadership that you see, and civil war or revolution, and a new cycle begins. Now, in his archetypical big cycle graph, we're at the loss of reserve currency and weak leadership. And also we're heading into a world war like situation when you look at what's happening at the global scale. According to him, this is where things change and we're entering into a new world from now on. Now, of course, this has happened a lot of times in the past where empires have come and empires have gone and reserve currencies have been changed. But now as we're entering in the future, what's really interesting about this archetypical big cycle is the introduction of a decentralized currency which never existed before. This can be a very revolutionary thing because now people are connected without borders over the internet, without any jurisdiction, which never happened in the history of humankind. One of the factors that determines the strength of a nation has been taken over by decentralization. What will be interesting to see is how this factor influences the rise of a new empire. Can there be any form of reduction in the corrupt powers that comes to be when new empires are formed? Can decentralized cryptocurrencies be the answer to a global reserve currency where people can exchange value without any restrictions? Back in early 2000 when internet came and we were able to send any form of media with the least amount of money in the least amount of time without any restriction, the world changed 15 years later. We couldn't have even fathomed that 20 years down the line we would just swipe right on a mobile phone and find a partner. And that piece of information or the book that you wanted was in some other part of the world now can be found on the internet within a few clicks. Things revolutionized with only 3 factors being into place, where media took less time to travel from one person to another, cost was negligible to transfer that media, and there were no restrictions on that exchange. The same thing is happening to value in today's world, where you can transfer a currency from one place to another without any form of restriction at the lowest time possible in the lowest cost possible. Implications of this could be immense because this is one of the factors that determines a country's strength or power. And what is to come is something new that we do not have any historical evidence for. Personally, I'm very positive about this change because this gives power to the people to exchange the value the way they want. And it's under no one's control. However, how the new empire that might come into power responds to this is something that we are yet to see. Thank you so much for listening to me. My name is Sahil Massey, and I hope you enjoyed the podcast, The Beginning of a New Age.
This was Karma Podcast, sponsored by Spiritual DAO on Near Blockchain. Stay tuned for the next episodes.